All right, hey guys, thank you very much for coming back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. We've got a great panel here today that we're going to talk about how to build communities through competitive gaming. And we actually have a pretty cool panel up here. We've got 3 game developers. We've got 2 people who've done some research. One of those researchers has got a book coming out later this year. Another one actually sets up all kinds of competitions on her own for her employer. Matt over there on the end. We've got TL here, Ben, Chelsea, and Aaron. Not necessarily in that order, but you know, you can take pictures and you can draw lines later. It'll be fun. And I'm your moderator. My name is Mike, and I work with Amazon. Now, to get things started, what I'd like you to do is kind of introduce yourselves and tell us one thing that you'd like us to remember about you or your company. Matt, we'll start with you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Matt Small. I'm the CEO and creative director and co-founder of Vector Unit. We're a local developer up in Marin. We're about 3 full-time people and about 4 other part-time people, so we keep it pretty small. But we've been around 10 years. We're actually celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. Our biggest game right now is Beach Buggy Racing, which is a mobile title that we've ported over to consoles as well. And we're working right now on Beach Buggy Racing 2. And we can talk about it more later, but one of the things that we really wanted to do with Beach Buggy Racing 2 was bring a sense of competition and community integration into the game. So look for that to drop later this year, like around June or something.
Hi, I'm Teal Taylor. I'm a sociologist, professor at MIT. I study games. I wrote a book on EverQuest, if there's some old MMO players out there. I did a book on esports in 2012 before it hit its new hype cycle. And I have a book coming out soon on live streaming, game live streaming. I guess the thing, so I'm not a developer, but I would say the thing that I think it's important for everyone to keep in mind is the power of communities to not just kind of populate games, but actually transform them, own them, and make them something that kind of gets taken up and are really become vibrant cultural spaces. So for me, communities are at the heart always of these discussions.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Ben Cohen, partner of Umbrella Games. We're a developer and publisher. I think the one thing I want you guys to take away from this is if you think you're actually really good at video games, you should challenge the guy that's recording me, Mikhail. He's an OG esports guy from a really long time ago. And looking forward to speaking today.
We'll give this one a run. My name is Chelsea. I started as a competitive gamer myself. I made my way into tournament directing and organizing tournaments for a few esport companies. I now find myself at ESP Gaming, and one of our greatest initiatives is to bring best-in-class post-production into a live esport environment to kind of bridge the gap and create stories and showcase players' personalities and showcase the titles that they're playing.
Hi, I'm Aaron Baker. I'm the CEO of GameCloud Studios. We've been around for about 9 years. We have integrated Game On into a solitaire game, which is now live in the App Store. So free plug, download Summit Solitaire. You have a chance to win some prizes. If you go over to the Amazon booth, they've these cool loot boxes, and you have a chance to win a prize at the show. So look forward to chatting more.
Thanks, guys. Disclaimer, the 3 developers we have up here are all using Game On. So if you want to ask them questions a little bit later about their experience with Game On, that's fine. And they will probably give answers in the context of Game On, among other things. One of the nice things is actually, Aaron, solitaire. Really? Solitaire competitive gaming? Okay, let's take a moment and say, what does competitive gaming really mean to you? I mean, I thought it would have been League of Legends, not solitaire.
Well, I think competitive gaming is a great way to create community around a product and give people something to talk about. So for something like solitaire, we actually have custom hand configurations each day to make it skill-based. And you know, in my experience, I think what happens is it's going to motivate players to go and talk about the hand configuration, what's the best way to play that hand that day, and all of a sudden, in something that's fundamentally not a social experience like solitaire, it's creating something to talk about. And I think that gives us a hook to start building community around.
TL, really, the game's called Solitaire. Does he have a chance of making this social?
Sure. I think one of the most interesting things about gaming and game communities is they are powerful taste deciders themselves on what's going to rise up and become a popular esport or competitive title. So if there's a richness there, if people are kind of drawn in, I mean, the devil's in the details always, but communities really make profound decisions about what they're going to elevate as a title that they gravitate to. So I never would want to decide at the outset what could or couldn't thrive.
Chelsea, tell me a little bit about what competitive gaming is in your more maybe traditional universe.
To kind of piggyback on the solitaire conversation, a game at the core of it, there's always some type of factor that you're getting scored on. If it's you completing the level or getting points or racing against somebody else, there's always a competition factor, even if it's not against somebody else, it's against you in the game. So with Game On, since all of these developers are integrated in that, what that does, it's going to give these casual game titles, like Solitaire, a chance to really create the community and to compete against people in a way that you would have never been able to do with that title.
So where do you guys think that these community members or even these competitive players are going to come from? I've certainly seen data that says, all esports fans live in South Korea. Obviously not true, but what are your expectations?
I could take a stab at that. I mean, we right now only have expectations because our game is still in development. But we have some experience with beach buggy racing currently, which is, I think it's been downloaded about 70 million times across the various app stores. And in our community, we interact with them mostly on social media, so through Facebook and Twitter primarily. And they come from all over the world, really. I mean, the people that engage with that game and give us feedback on the game and suggest ideas for new characters and things like that. So our expectation is that it's not going to be limited to particular territories. I mean, we're trying to craft it in such a way that it's sort of welcoming to everyone and that there are various sort of skill level entry points where people can come in and have fun without, feeling excluded.
I can tag, I'm not a developer, but I would just tag on one thing to this is I think, with gaming and with leisure in general, you can't hang on to your stereotypes for very long. Leisure preferences change quickly. And, when I first started studying gaming, it was not yet quite a mainstream leisure activity. It is now. So I would encourage everybody, this demographic question or who's going to play, hold your stereotypes lightly because things move and change really quickly in this space.
Yeah, I can kind of echo those sentiments. I think in general, one thing that we've learned from what we call the umbrella superfans who are emailing, tweeting, messaging us on Facebook all the time is that they're coming from all different parts of the world and they're different ages and everything like that. And I think when you look at esports and you kind of zoom out, go 30,000 feet up, you see that it's probably going to be a lot like soccer in the world. There's the rec leagues and there's people that aren't even, they're playing in their backyard. There's rec leagues, there's organized as you go up and up and up, and then there's the World Cup. And I think you have to look at it kind of in this way. There's a difficulty for everybody. There's a lot of people, everybody pretty much has a mobile phone, and I just don't think that there's any limits. I think everyone's a potential player and competitor.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, one thing to note on is in these games, on these mobile devices, you're not being region locked as you were to be on a console or a PC. Anybody can just hop on and they're playing people from America or from Korea, wherever it may be. So there should be no annotation saying that this is where my players come from if it's not in the data, and there's nothing to support that.
Jumping in on that, we had this interesting experience. We were doing a basketball game a while ago. We added a feature where we created a leaderboard and we added the player's country flag on the leaderboard. And literally just adding the leaderboard and having them represent their country and compete that way radically altered the metrics of the game. That alone increased daily retention 10%.
TL, any ideas on why that might be the case?
Well, I mean, this is the tricky thing about this is I'd say it's one of the most vexed questions in esports, which is the relationship between regionalism, nationality, and fandom. Esports is a global phenomenon, and it's very hard sometimes to say this is the American team, this is the Swedish team if you have Americans and Swedes on it. So what I would say at a more meta level, though, is people love customizing, identifying, being present in games. And hooks you give them for that, even if it's just a little icon, a little flag, those become powerful ways not only to represent themselves, but to make connections with others. So again, going back to the power of community and kind of hooking people together and sustaining them.
So, Matt, you mentioned in one of your earlier answers that you're not quite finished building. You're very close to finished, but you're not quite finished building your game yet, which means that you've decided to take on some engineering effort. I mean, as easy as Game On is to implement, he did it on the bleeding edge of our APIs. When we were still actually coding our APIs, these guys were building their games. So where do you see kind of a return on investment? What is the theory behind the investment to do this?
Well, I mean, for us, like I mentioned earlier, we're a small studio, and I can't take credit personally for doing the integration because it was my business partner, Ralph. But for us, it's a risk that we're taking, essentially. I mean, we knew that we wanted, I think I mentioned earlier, like we have a pretty large following on Facebook and on Twitter, and that's where we interact with our fans the most. But there's a disconnect a bit there between the social media presence and the in-game presence, right? Everyone's getting in and playing the games, and then they're leaving the game, and they're going onto Facebook and talking about it. And we do contests and drawing contests and costume contests and stuff like that on Facebook, but that stuff doesn't relate directly back. And so for us, it really felt like something we needed to do. And in terms of Game On, I mean, we were looking for a potential solution, a third-party solution, right around the time that we started talking to you guys about, this new service that you were spinning up. And it resonated with us because we have a lot of kids that play our game, and it was really important to us that we not have financial prizes in our contests, at least, not for the broad contest. We wanted it to be something that people play for fun and potentially for, like t-shirts and things like that, but not something for like, $10,000. And so, and that was part of what attracted us to the platform. And so it's a risk, but I think it's one, I mean, our players have been asking us for this for years, and so I think it's one worth taking.
Ben?
Thank you. I think for the most part, it's all the same. I think, we're kind of, it's like a bubble right now. It's like the second coming of a very large one esports. And the question is, where is it all going to net out? And I think for us, we think, like my soccer example before, I think that we're going to see, the highest level and the lowest level and everything else in between. And we want to be there. We don't know exactly where in that, where we'll land within that structure. If it's, super casual, super competitive, I mean, it's all going to be competitive, but there's obviously levels of difficulty. And I think we just want to be there and see how things go. And once we get a sense of how the response is and the engagement and all of that, we'll go from there. But obviously it's still early for us, and we're pumped to be here now and see how it goes.
Okay, Aaron, I'm going to pick on you here. A long time ago, maybe not that long ago, you were actually awarding $40 million in prizes in competitive games that you'd set up and that you were running. So you've kind of been there and you've done that. So, you can give away $40 million and still be net positive and still make a business model work?
Well, 40 million is a little higher than it was, but yeah, been doing that for a while. First, we were doing it in bars with coin-op product, running golf tournaments with cash prizes. It's about 15 years ago. And we even came up with a model to do a $100,000 live event. We flew players in from all over the world, ran a big event in Hard Rock. And keep in mind, this was about 15 years ago. More recently, when I was at EA, we were doing sponsored tournaments in Korea on FIFA Online. Even back, that must have been 10, 12 years ago, Hyundai was sponsoring $1 million plus in tournament play. It was really interesting at that time. You know, you watch these kids walking around and cameras following them, and nothing like that you even thought about over here, but you know, you already had broadcast gameplay in that market, you know, even 10, 12 years ago.
So now, I mean, Matt mentioned one of the things that was appealing to his company about Game On was that it wasn't a buy-in thing. It was kind of capital investment free from the player standpoint. It wasn't a cash thing. Does that seem at odds with where you've been or where you want to go?
Well, I think low barrier to entry was really important for us. I mean, we're doing freemium games. The fact that there's no consideration legally is actually really beneficial for us in terms of the markets we can enter with competitive play. And you know, we think making it easier for the player creates more competition, creates a larger pool of winners. With skill-based gaming, that's actually really important. It's very easy because it's skill-based, for you to wind up with, you know, the same 5 people that win every day. And by opening that pool and getting rid of that entry, you know, those kind of entry fees, we think that will really help keep a broader base of competitive players.
All right, TL, back to you on this one. Do you gain something? Do you lose something when you don't have, you know, something financial at stake? Are the communities going to be just as strong either way?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it's interesting because the financial side of gaming, I mean, probably some of you have been attending GDC for years and remember when, you know, in North America and Europe, thinking about having things like microtransactions and financial things embedded into games was completely scandalous. Like, that was just like, you would not do that. And we now have, I mean, the esports ecosystem has tremendous amounts of microtransactions, even to the degree of funding the big prize pools that come out of somewhere like Dota. So I don't think there's anything inherently tied to investment in that way. I tend to think, you know, players and communities bring to these games a whole set of values and orientations, and they figure things out. There's not something fundamental about money or not money. I think it really is going to come down to all the other little details that are going to solidify a gaming community. I'm looking at you and thinking about, you know, what it really takes to sustain a competitive community over time. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other hooks that have to be there for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying, and to kind of add the sense that there's a lot of players who play these casual games who may not see the worth in spending a lot of time, where you have the professional players who will play 8 hours a day and make these their career because there's an incentive for them. They're winning prizing, and what I've noticed from all of the conversation is Game On is creating that incentive, but in a very authentic and organic way, to where you're not necessarily buying or giving away something that is controversial, but this is something that's going to create more logged hours in the game, in my opinion, because you have people feeling like they're spending their time on something worthwhile. That kind of gives them the idea that they're a professional in a way. If I win a prize, I get to go tell my community and my friends, like, I am the best beach buggy racer ever, and I won this prize, and you didn't. And my friend is going to go try to beat me now because of the competitive level that's going to be now implemented in these games.
Okay, just kind of being the devil's advocate for a minute. Everyone in this room has a game, and they've got a leaderboard. They've already got the way to track high scores. Isn't that enough? Come on, guys, really?
No.
Can't I just post my high score on your Facebook page and be done with it?
Well, I would say based on the reaction from our players, no. That they, I mean, they like the leaderboards, and we do have people that post their high scores. You know, they'll screenshot their high score and post it up on Twitter and brag about it. But I think partly what we're trying to get to is the idea of the kind of constant refresh, like not just that there's one all-time leaderboard, that there are sort of multiple tournaments, and there are different kinds of tournaments too. Not just, you might be really good at, you know, racing and using your weapons, but maybe somebody else is really good at dodging an obstacle course. And so we can sort of introduce different types of gameplay that play to different people's skills. And, you know, and also the fact that you can have, you know, you can be the winner one week and not the winner the next week. Or you could be not the winner this week and you can still hope to be the winner the following week. Like that's a big incentive for people to come back.
I would tag one other thing too in this. So yeah, I agree. Leaderboards are not sufficient. And I think what's important is it's leaderboards in context. So if you think about your old arcade experience, it was perhaps sometimes knowing who those 3 letters on the leaderboard of the arcade machine, who they were attached to, right? There was a local context for it. I certainly remember playing, I forget which game it was, but it had a global leaderboard and then it had my friend's leaderboard, right? So I think one of the challenges is context at scale. So what does it look like to give people some context to the leaderboards that kind of don't make it just like, okay, it's some random person, but is there other stuff you can build in that gives a broader community context for it?
Chelsea, what are you hearing in all of the different community boards that you're monitoring?
So typically the community boards that I monitor hold a very, very large cash prize, and these people are doing it professionally. These people are doing it 8 hours a day. But all in all, there needs to be a sense of community. And in these leaderboards, the way that these professional players are treated and the way that the casual players who are going to be playing on the now Game On leaderboards, what needs to happen is the way that they view your game, their voice needs to be heard, and they need to feel like the developers are taking their time in the game and implementing these changes that they see fit. Because these are the players who are your professionals, even if it's not an esport, or even if you are considering it more of a casual title. Those are the people who are going to create the biggest benefit for your title.
So I'm hearing that we all get that social is really important for our games, and I'm guessing that that's not a surprise to you guys either, right? And we've established not only through our own research, but through your experience as well, that competition really helps people stay engaged. But how does a competition create communities where a community might not exist? I mean, for example, if one of our developers out here has got a new game and they want to put this game on the ground, how does one beget the other? Do they have to seed the community first and then they get this rich competitive landscape? Do they work on a rich competitive landscape first and the community follows? I'm missing some of these ordinals, these connections. Someone, please help me out.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I mean, to kind of speak to that point is there's always a starting point, and that starting point is always an alpha, and that starting point is always the beta after the alpha. And then you get feedback on the game, and you get feedback about what works, and yeah, like maybe it's not an established feedback and that community doesn't exist yet, but by presenting a product and giving it to a close-knit group to give you feedback about the game or about whatever you're developing, that's where the answers lie.
I would say, in our case, probably the community came first. I mean, the game came first. The community came out of that. And then competitions have sort of evolved, in our case, organically through, like I said, people sharing. I mean, the leaderboards that we have, people sharing leaderboard scores online and sort of competing with each other that way. One thing that I'm really curious about, and actually, if I could pose a question to Chelsea and TL, and you guys too, One thing that we're that we're wondering about in terms of scaling this effort is how important it is to build the feedback loop in terms of people being able to communicate with each other and also communicate directly with us into the game itself versus, through other channels, through forums and through Facebook and Twitter and, et cetera. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, communication is powerful, right? I mean, it is the thing that helps build context around leaderboards. My one plug or push, I would say, on this is any of you who are interested in building in communication or really building meaningful social experiences, build in processes that you can moderate, help the community be accountable. Don't just say, like, we're going to do social, and then not have ways of moderating and socializing people and dealing. So to me, that's the worst case scenarios, when people just like, do social, and none of the tools to make social manageable are there. So if you do social, it's a community management issue, so you've got to have that there too. But combined, it's a really powerful component. Communities build legacies and histories and trajectories together and stories. So, yeah, I don't know, Chelsea.
Yeah, and to your point, the biggest thing with that is you'll have a lot of people who will just create a handle, and that's kind of where it lies. People just post on the page, but there's no interaction. And you may be a dev, and I'm sure you guys know this, where you guys see the feedback, but if you're not integrating your voice in this conversation with the people playing your game, there's really no follow-up and there's really no benefit to the social aspect of the community.
I think for us, a lot of it is hoping that we can empower the users. So we want them not to just have a handle, but we want them to feel comfortable letting us know that they have an idea for the game or something like that. And I think empowerment's an important piece of that. And I think, to your point, it needs to be buttoned up, and it can't just be kind of like an open forum. It needs to be really, really focused and thought about, because feedback takes everyone's time, so you want to make it worth it.
So what are some of the things that you do to kind of close that loop? I mean, that makes good sense that we need to kind of make it actionable and make something happen, but give me some examples of how you guys have done that in the past in your own communities. Or are you working on that? Is that something you may be working on?
So I think it's much harder for smaller studios. Having dedicated resources for things like community management and social media is a lot tougher. There's a lot of good tools out there that help, but even things like opening up chat. And Solitaire may not be the best game for chat, obviously, but that's something we haven't done yet because I don't think we really have the capability in-house to provide the structure to it. And, it's something we would like to do, but, kind of getting back to what TL said earlier, I don't think we're in a position to manage it correctly, so we've deferred it.
I mean, for us, one of the best hires we ever made at a time when I thought we couldn't afford it was our community manager, Deb, shout out. She's amazing, and she's part-time. I mean, she's a working at home mother, and she works, it averages anywhere from like 10 to 30 hours a week, depending on what's going on. But she's great. And one thing that I have, that we've sort of developed together and that I've learned from watching her is she's super hands-on with everybody. I mean, and it seems almost impossible that with a big community you can be hands-on, but really even just responding to people, being responsive to people, taking their opinions seriously, when they show that they're a huge fan, sending them a t-shirt, or, whatever it is that you can do. You don't necessarily have to touch every single person in the community, but just letting people know that the door is open makes a really big difference. And I think that she's a big part of that. It's definitely worth doing even when you're kind of a small studio.
Have you talked to her about being your competitions manager?
No, but I will talk to her about it.
So if you had a competitions manager, what would you want a competitions manager to do? I mean, what would their job responsibility be outside of picking prizes and setting up different competitions and advancing people from one level to the next level?
So I think there's a couple different parts of that. One is the interaction with the community. one of the things that is exciting to me with something like Game On is the opportunity for sponsors. I think there's really significant opportunity to work with sponsors on event structures and really open up new ways for the sponsors to reach your community and the players. And so for us, I really see two aspects of it is one is not just setting up the events and prizes, working with social media and promoting them, but also potentially working with sponsors to create new kinds of events and things that are compelling both for the potential sponsor and for the players.
So one of the things that we've certainly seen good community engagement on is, hey, I've just set this really cool high score. Out of this competition, how much opportunity is there for leveraging learning new ways of doing things? Or does that really kind of almost mandate a streaming component that we haven't talked about yet?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that the streaming component will be the key to success. There's a lot of foundation levels that should be worked on prior to putting it out to the masses in a very organic way, in a way that happens live, in a way that if you don't have a way to manage your community offline, there's going to be a component where you're managing them online in real time. But to kind of loop back to it, what you'll see on Twitch is there's moderators for channels all the time. And if you find a core group of people in the community, and even if it's volunteers that are willing and able to show that they are a solid foundation and a solid voice in hopes to maybe join your company one day when you are in the place, utilize that. Utilize your community for all of these roles that you may not be able to fill, just like Twitch does with Twitch moderation and chat. It's kind of the same thing at the core level of it. It all ties back into your community because they want to see it succeed too.
So how important is something like game streaming to having a healthy competitive community?
I'm of the opinion that kind of streaming has changed everything. It's provided the boost and amplification for esports at a time when it had a little bit receded, and it is now, streaming is now the place a lot of, folks are going to go to look at a game, make decisions about if they're going to buy a game, and most importantly, if they're playing the game, also find communities and people that they're affiliated with and connecting with. So I think streaming is really integral, but I really echo this point about, if you're going to be on that platform, if you're going to be on Twitch, learning about it, being responsible for it, finding the good community members that you can promote and support. And I would say, too, it goes back to the community member thing, is really understanding, having people in that you're constantly talking to that are connected to the authentic experience of players. Because one of the most important things tournament organizers do is they may know what the community most values in a rule set, or we don't do this in our competition, but we do this. And you really need, you as the developer, the designer, may be too far removed to know all those things, but having people that you can trust that are going to get you that authenticity of the experience is really key.
So basically you're saying pick some champions in your community to help you manage your community.
Yep.
Yeah, I like to see them get paid. But yeah, absolutely. And that is, esports and game communities have long done that. Before game companies built in guild tools, people got together and figured out how to make guilds,
Yeah.
right? And they use third-party tools. So people want that, they will do the work, and it's just finding the folks who are interested and committed in your community.
All right, Aaron, I'm going to pick on you one more time here. I'm just trying to imagine how excited I'd be about watching streaming solitaire. Help me here.
I'm having a tough time with that too.
Okay, so maybe the community around solitaire is a good example of something that doesn't really need live streaming.
Well, I think there's a lot of technique, and for us, each day they're coming into a fixed hand, and I could see something like streaming actually being really interesting for somebody to see the path different people took and try to optimize the path. Streaming could actually become a big part of that, but I still have a tough time imagining somebody watching solitaire.
I think they would. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, there was a huge chess tournament that happened. Was it last year? And it was. You want to? Yeah. You want to? It was massively popular.
I mean, everyone knows about Magnus, the famous chess player. I mean, I watched his documentary, and that's how I discovered him. And then I watched a ton of YouTube of him playing chess. I don't even really know how to play chess, to be honest with all of you. And I was really into it. I don't think you're gonna have much of a problem. I think it's gonna be interesting, very interesting.
Well,
I was wondering, I mean, for us, one thing, I mean, all of the games that we've done historically have been racing games or some variation of it. And a couple of games that we've done, especially the ones that are a little bit more hardcore, in particular, the first game we did was Hydro Thunder Hurricane on the Xbox 360. And on that game, we had the ability to download ghosts in the leaderboard. So there was always like a sort of competitive leaderboard element to it, and you could download the ghosts of like the players that were above you and race against them. And it was a way for people to learn technique, basically. Like you would find shortcuts that you hadn't found before, or realize that somebody was using their boost or saving their boost for a particular stretch of the track. And I feel as though for our games, I mean, definitely live streaming would be fantastic, but I think you can get a lot of leverage out of asynchronous sort of streaming as well. I mean, I like watching people in Clash, like, you know, I like watching some of those pre-recorded games in Clash and stuff, and you can learn a lot from those. So we're hoping to maximize that too.
so there's actually a connection that I'm looking for, a connection between competition, community, and what sounds like an increase in one of our monetization KPIs, retention. Do you see that people who are learning new skills in a competitive game will actually stay in your game longer or have more sessions per week?
I mean, I think we don't necessarily measure skill as one of our, well, I mean, I guess we do indirectly because we can measure progress and players' progress in their win-loss ratio. So I take it back, we do measure skill. Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges that we have for our games is in a free-to-play environment that our games are pretty skill-based. And so, you know, there's no opportunity really to, I mean, there are fewer opportunities to sell somebody something that's going to make them win if they're struggling. Like they, you have to basically be able to drive competitively down the track against the AI, or in online games against other players. And so, yeah, I mean, I think for us, I totally just lost my train of thought.
How does that, I'm trying to make the connection between, I think we all get communities important, I think we all get competitions important, but I mean, at some point, if this doesn't help the bottom line, I'm not going to dedicate an engineer to integrate any of this.
Yeah, no, and definitely like, so getting back to what you were saying, like the, like learning the skills of the game, especially for something that's where there's some subtlety to it, like, well, almost any game actually has some subtlety to it, whether it's solitaire or you know, Hearthstone or beach buggy racing, and being able to watch other people play and hopefully being able to interact with them and talk about, you know, their techniques and when they make these decisions and why they make these other decisions. Not only is it a way for people to kind of like just talk about the game and enjoy it, but it definitely helps being good at something in order to get the enjoyment out of it. And once you master even just one of the many skills that you could master, like that's a sense of accomplishment that I think brings people back.
Just to add on to, I think it's really important to understand people compete and watch competitions for lots of different reasons. And sometimes it's to learn, sometimes it's aspirational, but very often, and maybe you've had this experience where you watch somebody play and it kind of animates you to go play. This happens all the time in media, or like, you know, you watch a fantasy movie and then you want to go play an MMO. Like we get in these loops with media, so I think sometimes it's learning and sometimes it's the thing that just like, oh, I watched this really cool competition and now I want to get back in there. So watching and playing, it's complex. There's not just one reason people do it.
Gotcha. Chelsea, I'm guessing that you've seen some games actually do fairly well or benefit considerably from their integrating competition. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be dealing with them if they didn't have the competition.
Yep.
Do you have any stories you can tell about that?
I think one of the biggest games that I worked with that really started from a grassroots, underground competition base was Madden. And Madden has a mobile section as well, but just to give you an idea, there was absolutely no production, very little streamers. The community was incredibly underground and community managed as well, to be nice. And when they started integrating tournaments and live streaming and the competitive level and showcasing how that really worked, even though if there was people who didn't understand the game or how to play, people wanted to play. And you gained traction from the NFL and these huge players. So if you take things at the core of it, there's going to be really big players who end up taking thought into what you're doing at a very base level. If it's solitaire, you may have people who have been doing card games for a really long time take interest in your game and really showcase that at a higher level and help you get into doors that you would have never thought would be there. And doing that in a streaming setting is huge because you're opening the doors to people that you don't think will be interested, but that shouldn't be, you shouldn't hold yourself back from giving that content and making that decision for your community.
I like where you went with that. You made an interesting connection I want to follow up on. You were talking about Madden, which is primarily a console-based experience, but then you also tied that into kind of a solitaire experience, which one could argue is, primarily on mobile. Is there anything about this form factor that changes any of the truth we've discovered about competition and communities?
Yeah, I think one thing about it is if you're to watch somebody that's better than you are do something in a game, no matter what the game or what they did, if you both have the same phone and you saw how they did it, you might think to yourself, wow, I can do this too. And I think that that's a powerful thing. And I think gaming and things outside of gaming, we all have used video for that purpose, for tutorial and gaining a deeper understanding. I think that, and that kind of ties back to your retention question, I think that absolutely increases retention, because if you're constantly learning from people that are better than you are, whether or not you'll ever be able to do what they're doing, you're going to keep trying. And as long as the ratio between success and failure is reasonable or worth it to you, you're going to keep coming back. And I think that ties in maybe 3 of your last questions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me adding, one thing that mobile has an edge on in comparison to any other platform is if you're like me, I spend 90% of my day on my cell phone. Like, it's really hard for me not to be on my phone right now. And so for me, I may have to wait to get off work to go play a game or get that competitive edge or whatever it may be. But on mobile, you can be on your lunch break or be on a phone call while you're competing. Like, multitasking at its finest is mobile gaming.
So to go back to your original question, the lack of really tight analog control system on mobile is definitely a factor for skill-based gaming. But what's interesting with that is it means your games need to have a different kind of skill. And as they become less focused on the manual dexterity elements, more on different learning and strategies, it actually, I think, opens up to a larger market as well, which could be very interesting.
So I could easily stand up here and take the rest of your time all day. However, I appreciate that some of you may have questions for our panel. If you would like to ask a question, please come up to the microphone and let us know who your question's for, or the panel in general.
I don't know who to direct this question to exactly, whether it's Amazon or the panelists. One of the big issues with mobile has been the ability to give prizes for games that you're monetizing on Google. Any change in that landscape now with the announcement of Game On or pricing?
So Google still can't do pricing on Google. You can run the tournaments. So I can use us as an example. If you're on Google or outside the US right now, we put you in one tournament. So it's all in-game items. And if you're in US on Amazon Kindle or on Apple, we do the pricing. So it's in a separate tournament bucket. Hopefully, like you said, hopefully Google eases that at some point soon.
Thank you. Hey, my question is more on about local community. Is it a gain or a loss? When I say loss, because at the end we are dividing the consumer again. And how important it is for an indie developer to have a local community as well. And what is the right time to start building the local community?
So global communities versus local and localized communities. So your Facebook community, is it localized or is it just pretty much generic Facebook worldwide?
It's generic Facebook worldwide, Deb.
Would you change that with the addition of competitive gaming?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I think we would keep an eye on if there were particular communities that really were really taking off and needed that particular touch. But I mean, the thing that we found is, I think one of the things that people actually enjoy about our Facebook page is that there are a lot of, I mean, we have probably 15% of our audience is in the US and the rest is kind of spread all over the place. And I think people enjoy, seeing faces and voices from different countries in one place. And so I feel like it's been a gain for us more than a hardship. But I'm sure that if we had more resources or if we were more intensely focused on particular localities, or if, we spoke particular languages better and didn't have to rely on Google Translate or something like that, like we probably would, we would benefit from that as well.
Did that answer your question?
Partly, I won't say yes.
So would you be interested in, does it make sense to use geography as an entry qualification? So that's actually a feature that you currently have in Game On. Is that something that you'd be looking at using as saying, hey, here's kind of a, West Coast American, East Coast American, Southeast Indian, Southeast Asian requirement?
I think I can add to that. It's really dependent on the game and situational. That's never going to have a blanket answer of what works. And the reason why is you may have Europe as a region that has a high skill gap. And if they're playing against North America, they're going to win 90% of the time. You want to centralize your locations and region lock your tournaments.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Hi, so I was just curious, lots of talk about esports with Game On, which I think is very neat, but isn't this sort of the antithesis of esports? Esports is supposed to be sort of the elite. You have majors, super majors, local stuff like that, where this is very much opened up to more people. I know that if I were to play Tekken online, for example, I want to play against people who are only at my skill level. I don't want to play against JDCR. He would wreck me and that wouldn't be any fun. So when you guys are talking about this compared to competitive gaming, compared to esports communities, are they different communities? Because I very much would see them as different communities. What are your thoughts on that?
I think if you look at just professional sports, physical and online, except for esports, they all have tiers all the way up to the top. And you kind of, as you age or you advance skill-wise, you advance. I think it's important that esports has all of the tiers. So I don't think it's the antithesis. I think it's the maturity.
Sort of like the football league that my kid plays in. Yeah, he's not going to be playing in the NFL, trust me. But it's fun that he has a youth league that's his level.
Right.
Yeah. I was just going to add, we just did a panel on esports history. And in fact, the history of esports comes from small grassroots lands. We're in a very particular moment right now where it's tier 1 esports and a lot of money. But that range and that kind of pro-am scene, that's actually always been a part of esports. So if anything, there's some interesting potential hooks to get back to some of that.
Well, I mean more so that I don't go to super major if I don't want to play against them, for example. But with this system, it's way more difficult to lock out the higher skill level. That kind of question.
I defer to the
I believe that actually you can, I mean, it's up to the developer to sort of integrate this, but if you have sort of metrics or way of kind of determining skill, you can compartmentalize people based on skill level. So, I mean, there's probably ways for people to game it. I mean, I think for our first iteration, we're doing, a combination of like win-loss ratio and like how far they've advanced in the game. And I suppose someone really good could kind of start a new game and fake it so that they could crush noobs. But we're hoping that people don't do that too much.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I just had a question about how with mobile games for small teams you might deal with like cheaters in leaderboards, but not like global leaderboards, like smaller sort of tournaments and stuff where you can't like obviously manage it as an individual because there might be like thousands of tournaments going on. And any like stuff you might have tried for your products to try and like lock out players who are new so you can't like come in and start cheating straight away, or just how you might deal with that at all. I don't know, like Counter-Strike has the thing where you can't compete until you've like played so many hours and so on.
I didn't quite get it. Yeah, I didn't get that.
I was just curious about how small teams might deal with cheaters for, yeah. So like with Counter-Strike, like they have you locked out, like you can't play competitive until you've done like this many hours or whatever.
Yeah.
I was wondering what you've done with your products or attempted to do with like detecting people cheating, or like how you can stop them from doing that. Cheers.
So historically, I can answer that, not related to solitaire, but in previous initiatives. There's going to be some great solitaire bots coming. We actually were logging all the play data in the background. So when we were doing cash prize tournaments in arcade machines, so we could replay them. We caught players putting recording devices on trackballs and playing them back, and we were able to detect it because we were seeing the same signals play back that come in multiple days, and would see the same data set basically come through multiple times. The server cheats, we didn't have as much problem with people trying to fake data on the server. We caught a couple people trying to do SQL inserts, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. The hardest thing to do on mobile is, it's relatively easy for somebody to create a little machine that does the taps, and is that actually cheating or not? I mean, from our opinion, of course it is, but if somebody makes a robot that can play better than a human, it's actually relatively straightforward to do that now. So I don't know what the answer to that is. Do you guys have any thoughts?
My initial thought when I hear cheating in competitive gaming, if you have a way to find out who's cheating in your game and then pair those players together in their own section of your game, please do that.
That's a great answer.
If you find someone who can build that robot, I think I can get a job for them at JPL. Really.
Would hire them.
They'll build the next Mars rover, right? Guys, are there any more questions that we can answer for you guys? All right. Thank you very much. There is one more thing I'd like you to do, in addition to smiling with all of these services that you can get from Amazon Game Tech. Big smile. Thank you very much. What I would like you to do is go to this survey. Okay, Will, the survey slide. Can you put the survey slide up for us, please? Yeah, okay, survey slide didn't make it in there. But guys, thank you very much for attending today. And another big round of applause for all of our panelists, please.